On that Friday morning, Sophie called me in a panic, urgently asking me to come home. I immediately left the family business that my father had passed down to my brother and me, rushing home, sensing that something serious had happened. Sophie, a stay-at-home mom, never bothered me at work unless it was something truly urgent. I began to worry that something had happened to one of our teenage daughters, perhaps an injury at school, given how athletic they were. My daughters meant the world to me, both growing into beautiful young women, much like their mother. We ran the largest electrical company in the state, with me managing the commercial side and my brother handling the residential side. Over the past 6 years, we'd tripled our volume each year, making our mother incredibly proud. Last year, we reached $5 million in net profit for the first time in the company's 50-year history. Since our father's passing, we transformed the company into a very successful business, now valued at $20 million. My mother, still the majority shareholder with 52%, had made Victor the president, while my brother and I each owned 24%. After our father's death, she entrusted me with managing her personal investments, which I handled aggressively with her broker, yielding impressive results. When I got home, I found movers packing our belongings. Sophie, standing next to her new car, the one I had bought her, told me she was leaving for good. Our daughters had already moved out without my knowledge. She handed me divorce papers, claiming she had fallen out of love and was now with someone else. She left without so much as a real explanation, ending our 17-year marriage coldly and abruptly. There was no opportunity to discuss things with our daughters. I suspected she'd met someone online, but I quickly realized it was someone local. I asked the movers for the delivery address and was stunned when I recognized it. I tipped the driver, asked him to lock up, and then made a stop to verify the address. What I discovered shattered my life. Sophie had left me for someone we both knew very well. This betrayal was devastating, especially considering who she was leaving me for. Victor, my brother, and I had been inseparable in our youth, though we drifted apart as we grew older. His brother, Victor, now a Marine, had remained a good friend, holding on to the strong moral foundation he was raised with. As my father's business grew, I spent much of my spare time helping out, sometimes receiving stock for upcoming projects. I had once asked why he hadn't used his name for the business. He said, "Tate & Sons is overused and often fails. Use your mother's maiden name and add some spirituality." Sophie had always felt that my old-fashioned views on parenting were too restrictive, especially when it came to allowing our daughters to date without a chaperone. She argued that I was treating them like her father had treated her, and that her rebellion against him was proof that I was making the same mistakes. I had always been strict, worried that they might ruin their lives by getting pregnant in school, but Sophie believed that my views were stifling their development. She felt I was hurting our daughters by holding them back, just like she had felt suffocated by her own father. Sophie was relentless, attacking me over our differences in how we raised our children. I poured myself a stiff drink and tried to distract myself by watching TV, but all I found were outdated reruns. I must have passed out drunk, because I woke up with a pounding hangover on the living room sofa. After a shower and shave, I got ready for the day. I did my usual Saturday chores, and by 1 p.m., I turned my cell phone back on. I had messages from my mother, Victor, Sophie, and our daughters. I suspected that the girls were in on this and were siding with their mother. The only message I trusted was from my mother. The rest didn't matter to me. I listened to the messages, then deleted them. Sophie's message said we could reach an agreement once I calmed down. The real estate agent called right after. "Mr. Tate, your wife finally showed up this morning, but she wasn't happy," she said. "Miss Waterston is shocked you're including the furniture with the house." After seeing comparable homes, she agreed to add $20,000 for the furniture. "Thank you for the update," I replied. "I want it sold quickly. It holds too many memories." Miss Waterston continued. "She broke down, not expecting you to do this." I asked her, what did she expect? She left him for his brother. Sophie seemed surprised that I demanded to be bought out from the family business. "I just want to get away from them," I said. "In the divorce, she's tried to take the kids completely from me." "She seems shocked," Miss Waterston commented. I told her, She might fool others, but I know how people like her think. Miss Waterston, I've arranged for a good divorce lawyer. I'll text you her details. I thanked her and hung up just as I saw my sister Connie's car pull into the driveway. I finished making my coffee and went to let her in. It must be important for you to drive halfway across the state, I said. Mom was devastated when she found Sophie and your daughters at Victor's place. Connie said, unable to believe it. How long has it been going on? I asked, how long? Mom found out from Sophie that it's been about 2 years, Connie replied. How could I have been so blind? I said, before we talk more, read the divorce papers. I'll get you some coffee. Connie skimmed through the papers, noting how exaggerated everything was. Sophie wants you out of your daughters' lives, she said, her voice filled with disbelief. Most of these claims are nonsense. I responded, Mom doesn't want me leaving the family business. So, Mom wants you to accept being Victor's cuckold and cash cow. Connie asked, shocked. Oh my God, she swore, surprising me as I had never heard her use such language. How do I explain this to Mom? She won't understand the full betrayal, I said. She might see the infidelity and breakup, but not why I'm leaving the company. I can't stay knowing Victor turned my wife and children against me just to keep Mom's approval, I added bitterly. Your husband makes business deals, Connie pointed out. He could find a buyer for the company. Victor has left you no choice. You have to write him out of your life. She called her husband, explaining everything, and when she hung up, she said, he'll have a team appraise the company on Monday. I need to convince Mom it's the best solution. I pulled out the last 5 years of financial records and handed them to her. Your husband will need these, I said. What about Beau and Bree? Connie asked. That's up to Judge Donald McDonald, I replied. I wanted Dale Britton, but he's tied up with a big case. Sophie's lawyer is painting an ugly picture. We spoke briefly before Connie left to talk to our mother. That night, I couldn't sleep, missing Sophie beside me. I decided to leave town for a few days after meeting the lawyer, just needing some space to think clearly. Connie called after she and Mom had spoken with the pastor. He said the one who has been hurt the most may never fully get over it, she said, her voice heavy with concern. What John and Beth had done to me was despicable, but unfortunately, it's become all too common these days. Love and decency have lost their value. Now, they're just tools used to manipulate and control others. Mom was shocked when the pastor told her that I wasn't the first person to be destroyed by family and that I wouldn't be the last. He was right. Mom eventually agreed to sell the business, though not because of what John did. Connie explained that Mom knew John would ruin it without me. She wants to know who should take your place, Connie said. Does she understand that John is dead to me? I asked. Yes, Connie replied. I had to explain to her what being a cuckold means. Mom swore she'd liquidate Beth if she ever saw her again. Tell Mom to appoint Carl Robertson as president, I said. He knows everything I do and can prevent John from overruling him. It's crucial for getting the best price for the company. Mom needs to publicly demote John, I added. Should we warn John? Connie asked. No. If Mom can't do it, she should appoint you as CEO until the company is sold. I need to stay out of it to avoid it being used against me in divorce court. Connie agreed to check with her husband. Later, she texted me, I'm the new CEO. I'll implement your suggestions tomorrow. I was having brunch when Sophie called. This time, I answered. Can we talk? She asked. No. Irraplia. If you or your lover contact me again, I'll file mistreatment charges. Everything will be settled in court. We need to discuss Beau and Bree, she said. I'm requesting paternity tests to determine if they are John's or mine, I said firmly. We all deserve the truth. I'll never return to anything involving this. Beth gasped. They're yours, and you know it. I thought I had a loving wife until Friday, I said, my voice cold. But I was wrong. Now, I have to consider that I might not even be their father. John could have been deceiving me for years. Beth started crying, but I hung up before she could say anything more. I immediately called my former assistant Joanne for advice. Her husband, David Avid, had gone through a tough divorce himself. When David arrived, I explained the situation and handed him the divorce petition. Let's be clear, David said, reading over the papers. You don't know when the affair started, Other than hearsay, right? Yes, that's true, I said. In court, you'd be justified in requesting paternity tests given the family situation, David explained. The way you found out implies long-term deception. Judge Donald McDonald will need biological proof before making any rulings. Is the judge that strict? I asked. Yes, David replied. My divorce took 6 months, but he always prioritized our children's needs. It was tough, but in the end, he made the right decisions. I offered David a drink, and we chatted for a while about his relationship with Joanne when suddenly I saw a truck pull into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw that it was John. That fool dares to show up here after what he did? I muttered. David said, sit down. I'll handle this. If he won't leave, I'll show him my badge. He doesn't want to deal with the Cape Girardeau police. David opened the front door and lowered the screen window so I could hear their conversation. John slammed his truck door and yelled, "Where's my stupid brother?" I told him we could work it out, but he wouldn't listen. Now, he has to because I need to straighten him out. If he won't listen, I'll shove my fist down his throat. David calmly responded, "Go home and cool down before you do something you'll regret." "Screw you. Get out of my way." John snapped. David didn't flinch. "You left Beth in tears because he's questioning the paternity of your daughters? He needs to be straightened out, and I'm the one to do it." "When did the affair start?" David asked. 5 years ago, if it's any of your business," John replied. "Interesting," David said, showing his badge. "Because Beth told your mother yesterday it was 2 years ago. I have to wonder what the truth is, since both of you are making the other look like a liar." John turned white as David continued. "After making James an unknowing cuckold, you expected him to just accept it and carry on like nothing happened? Was your plan to break him and make him your submissive fool? What gives you the right to think your brother should do as you say?" John stood there in stunned silence, his expression betraying that they hadn't planned this out at all. David added, "I wonder what the real truth is." David's voice was calm, but firm as he spoke. "The judge will likely say this recorded conversation only adds to your credibility. I suggest you get back in the truck and prepare Beth for the paternity test. Your story lacks credibility, and any further explanations will be seen as more lies." I watched John walk back to his truck, the realization dawning that things weren't going as he had planned. David waited until John drove away before coming back inside. "What's your lawyer's name?" he asked. "I'll contact her on Monday and send a copy of this recording," I replied, giving him the details. "Why did you bring your police cam?" I asked. "It's standard in domestic situations," David explained. "When Joanne told me why you needed to talk, I knew anything could happen, so I came prepared." "Let Joanne know I'm leaving town after seeing the lawyer," I said. "It's best I stay away for a while." "Is there anything the cops might need to be called about?" David asked. "Our older sister is now the CEO of the family company," I said, thinking about the changes in motion. "Tomorrow, she'll appoint Carl Robertson as president. My brother will be demoted to vice president." "Why is this happening?" David asked. "Mom doesn't want my brother destroying what my father and I built before she finds a buyer," I explained. "It's not just about business. It's about keeping things intact until it's time to let go." "I agree with your reasoning," David said. "You should be packed to leave right after your lawyer appointment. John will see it as you doing everything. From what I've learned, he's hot-headed and reacts without thinking. He could do anything." After David left, I cleaned up the kitchen and went to Ace Hardware for a new lock set. It took 2 hours to install, and as I was about to change the house security system code, my phone rang. It was Beth's father. "What's going on, James?" he asked. "My granddaughters have been calling from an unknown number because Beth confiscated their phones, and yours is never on." "Did you ask Beth why?" I asked. "She says it's personal, and we'll explain later." "Katie and I want answers now." "Beth moved out on Friday," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She called me home as the movers finished and served me divorce papers. She said she's in love with another man, and that his name doesn't matter." "Are you serious?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I replied. "The movers gave me her new address because Beth wouldn't. She moved in with my older brother. They've been in a relationship for 2 to 5 years, depending on who you ask. She doesn't want me to have any contact with Beau and Bree, and she's asking for 1 hour a month of supervised visits." Why would she do that? You've been a great father. She probably doubts I'm their biological father, I explained. My lawyer will request DNA tests to confirm. Also, I'm no longer involved in the family business. It sounds like she knows who their real father is, Beth's father said, his voice steady but concerned. What should I tell my granddaughters? He asked. Tell them the truth, which they haven't been getting from their mother, I said, knowing it was the right thing. They deserve to know everything. After we said goodbye, I reset all the codes for the house and then went to Golden Corral for a bite. I had just left the lawyer's office at 11 a.m. She agreed that the situation was a mess, but thought the video David sent would undermine the plaintiff's credibility. She believed their stupidity had put me in the driver's seat for the first time. I'd canceled all of Beth's debit and credit cards and removed her from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate office to give them the new house key and access code. Once that was done, I hit the road south with no particular destination in mind. About an hour later, Joanne called. Just checking in, you on the road? She asked. Yeah, I said. Connie just walked in to meet Carl Robertson. I left about an hour ago after dropping off the keys, I said, heading south. I'll call to update you. Text me first so I can pull over, Joanne replied. I stopped at a rest area and finally let my emotions out, letting the tears come. After a while, a police cruiser pulled in. The officer got out and approached me. I saw you pull in 2 hours ago and got concerned, he said. I've been through a lot emotionally, I said, and decided not to drive for a while. Going through a divorce. He smiled knowingly. I figured. The road south with no destination is a common choice. He handed me a cold soda from his cooler, and we chatted for a bit. A text came in, and he noticed. Need privacy? He asked. No, you might find this interesting, I replied, putting the call on speaker. How did it go? Joanne asked. Carl accepted the president position temporarily, I said. He knows it was your suggestion. Joanne said Carl and Connie had informed John of his removal. John didn't take it well and refused the vice president position. Carl, being as straightforward as ever, told him, I guess you've decided to quit. Let me call security to escort you out. John cursed and blamed me for everything, but I was already moving on. So, my brother's unemployed like me now, I said to Joanne, trying to keep the bitterness in check. That must hurt his pride. Off the record, James, I think that was Connie and your mother's plan all along, Joanne said. Expect a call from Connie shortly. I smiled at the thought. I had just finished explaining when my phone rang. It was Connie. I put her on speaker. When can you get back here? She asked. Why, what's going on? I replied. Sounds like you've got everything under control, she said. Carl is perfect for the job. My husband lined up financing so we can buy John's shares. Mom wants him out. We'll use a business loan for it. Carl agreed to be vice president if you return as president. Fine, I said, a weight lifting off my shoulders. I'll meet you at Mom's around 6 tonight. Tell Joanne to order new office furniture and repaint the offices, she added. If she gets it right, I'll give her a 10% raise. Will do, I said, feeling a surge of relief. We ended the call. The police officer, who had been quietly observing, asked, What's the name of your company? Parish Electrical, I replied. We're in about a third of the state and always expanding. Our slogan is no job is too big or too small. Ah, that's right. Your dad's favorite saying, he noted, impressed. We chatted for a bit more before he handed me his business card. Here's my number in case you need anything, he said. And here are directions to reverse your rot. I thanked him, feeling grateful for his kindness. As he followed me out, I made a mental note of his details before heading to my parents' place. Around 5:30 p.m., I arrived, and my mother met me at the door. We shared a quiet moment, and Connie was still at the airport picking up her husband. Mom and I chatted about everything until my phone rang again. It was Beth's father. What's up? I answered. Have you heard any rumors about your brother at the workyard? He asked, his voice shaky. I stepped outside before responding. Yes, but I've seen no proof. Why? Your brother has illegal videos on his home computer. Beau and Bree found them and called us. They're scared to be near him. We picked them up from school, but I don't know what to do, he said urgently. Call Joe, I advised. Explain what happened and tell him you're giving the kids sanctuary. Use a throwaway phone to avoid detection. Why call Joanne? He asked, confused. Her husband's a cop. I said. He'll handle it. Thanks for helping my daughters. Text me your number, he added before hanging up. I quickly texted him my number and then went back inside to speak with my mother. Before I could say anything, my mom mentioned the police had arrived and wanted to speak with me. I quickly ended the call with Beth's father and cleared my messages. It was David, and he didn't waste any time, getting straight to the point. Good to see you, David said, but his tone was serious. Your daughters are missing, and your phone was busy when we tried to reach you. Beth filed a kidnapping complaint against you. I looked at my concerned mother. When did they disappear? After school at 2:30, David said. I've been in touch with the state troopers. Call him, he'll understand. David handed me a card and called the number, his face relaxing with each passing second. When he hung up, my mother saw his relieved smile. I should have known, David said. You have the perfect alibi. You were an hour away, sharing a soda with another officer when your daughters disappeared. David's phone buzzed with 5 text messages in quick succession. He stepped outside to make a call and then returned, looking even more serious. James, what do you know about the rumors about your brother? He asked. People say he likes them younger than he should. I replied, the knot in my stomach tightening. I always kept my girlfriends away from him because I had suspicions. Why? What makes you think that? He asked, sitting down across from me. Your daughters found something disturbing on his computer, David continued. They told someone at school, and now they're in sanctuary while we investigate. I put my head in my hands, feeling the weight of it all. When I reconnected with Beth at 17, she ran with a wild crowd. I picked up my drunk brother that night, and she asked for a ride home. I wonder if John was her date. David whispered. I wish you could prove that. I need to, I said. This can't keep happening. David sighed. Tell your daughter's protectors that we won't charge them. But I need a few days to resolve this. Your mistake was giving them my wife's number. It's Beth's parents. They had no clue. I told them to use a disposable phone. I said, feeling the weight of my decisions. David laughed. Be thankful for carrying in-laws. I'll get a warrant for your brother's computer and investigate further. Into a place of darkness, a figure who exploited the vulnerable and manipulated the ones closest to him. James, though betrayed, seemed to have a sense of clarity in the wake of everything. The truth, as painful as it was, became a weapon in a battle neither side had prepared for. Beth, sitting alone in her car, wiped away her tears, realizing how much she had allowed herself to be manipulated by John. The guilt weighed heavily on her, but it wasn't just for the betrayal against James. She now saw her daughters in a new light, innocent, impressionable, and caught in the crossfire of a toxic relationship that had ensnared both her and John. She didn't know where to turn or how to explain herself, but the rift between her and James seemed too deep to mend. Back at the house, James was organizing his thoughts. The situation was far from resolved, but at least he had a plan. It was hard to say who he felt more betrayed by, John or Beth. John, for obvious reasons, had stolen from him not just his wife, but his trust, his dignity, and the life they had once planned. Beth, however, had played a more subtle game, one of lies, deception, and manipulation. But in her betrayal, she too had lost sight of what was important, their children. With the girls now in sanctuary, James knew that he had to keep his head above water. The emotional toll was brutal, but the stakes were higher than personal feelings. His daughter's safety was paramount. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Secrets still buried in the depths of John and Beth's twisted relationship. The fact that Beth had been so evasive about everything only reinforced the doubts in his mind. As time passed, Beth found herself drifting further away from her own family, isolated by the choices she had made. Her relationship with John was exposed to the public, and the consequences were just beginning to unfold. Not only had she lost James, but she had also lost the support of her own parents and, likely, the trust of her daughters. Meanwhile, John was experiencing his own personal downfall. Removed from the family business and cast aside by James, he found himself without a foundation. The high from his affair with Beth was beginning to wear off, and the cold reality of his actions was setting in. The world he had tried to create by tearing apart James's life was collapsing around him. Without the facade of a perfect family or the financial backing of the business, John realized he had nothing left. The tension between the two brothers, now fully realized, was more than just business. It was personal, and it was raw. James had no illusions about who John was, but there was still a part of him that couldn't help but wonder if things could have been different. If only John hadn't chosen betrayal over family. If only Beth hadn't chosen lust over love, perhaps the damage could have been avoided. But now, with their lives shattered, all that remained were the consequences, and the wreckage that would take years to untangle. Beth, in her moment of self-reflection, tried to reach out to James once more. This time, her tone was different, less defensive, more regretful. "James," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I know I've destroyed everything. But I want to try. I want to fix this. For our daughters." James listened in silence, but deep down, he knew that some things couldn't be fixed. The betrayals were too deep, the scars too fresh. Still, there was a small part of him, the father, the man who had once loved her, that considered the possibility of rebuilding. But trust, once shattered, was not easily repaired. As the conversation ended, James set the phone down, staring at it for a long while. He could hear the distant sound of his daughters playing in the next room. The weight of the future hung heavily over him. There was no going back, but there were still choices to be made. The hard truth was, there was no way to undo the past. But he could shape what came next for himself, for his daughters, and for the future that was still uncertain. He turned off his phone and walked into the living room where his daughters were waiting. There was still much work to be done, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to lose them. And in that small victory, he found the strength to keep going. "Help Tom transition into the role," I said, "if that's what we decide. He's been loyal, and his skills are vital for the company's future." Connie wiped her eyes and nodded, clearly touched by the gesture. Tom, usually reserved, gave me a rare, grateful smile. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short period of time, but there was a strange sense of solidarity now, something that had been missing for years. "Let's make this work," I said firmly. "We'll rebuild the company the right way, together." Connie nodded again, her expression a mixture of relief and determination. "It's what Dad would have wanted," she said softly. As we discussed the loan and the plans for expansion, my mind wandered back to John. His attack on me, despite the physical damage he'd caused, only served to solidify in my mind that he was a man driven by selfishness and rage. I had no doubt he would continue to lash out, but I had a clear path now, a path that was focused on my daughters, my company, and my own healing. The hospital stay was rough. I had a lot of time to reflect, and it wasn't lost on me how much of my life had been shaped by the choices of others, choices I had no control over. But I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let John or Beth's actions define the future for me or my daughters. I would protect them at all costs, and I would make sure they understood the value of integrity, trust, and love, values I held dear and that John had long discarded. I was finally home again after a few days in the hospital, recuperating. My ribs were still sore, but the bruises were fading, and the reality of the situation began to settle in. My focus was on the company, my daughters, and getting back to a sense of normalcy, even if that seemed impossible at times. Beth reached out again, her voice filled with hesitation. "James, we need to talk." I almost didn't pick up, but I knew I had to. I needed to hear what she had to say, if only to get closure. "What is it?" I asked flatly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was wrong about everything. John, the choices I made. I lost sight of who I was, who we were. I just want to fix things for the girls." Her words sounded sincere, but I knew better than to trust her too easily. "I've heard enough empty apologies from you, Beth. What's done is done. There's no fixing what you broke." I paused, feeling a lump form in my throat. "And the girls? They deserve the truth, not lies and manipulation. That's all I'll ever give them now. I'm done." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, James," she finally whispered. I hung up without another word. It was over finally. The emotional weight of it all had lifted, but it left behind a cold, clear sense of what the future held. I could no longer look back at what could have been with Beth. only forward to what I had to do next. In the coming weeks, I focused on solidifying the company's future. With Carl and Connie's help, we began the process of restructuring and expanding, making sure to secure a strong financial foundation that would prevent anything like what had happened with John from ever happening again. We also brought in Tom as CFO, and I could already see the positive changes starting to take shape. But even more importantly, I focused on my daughters. Beau and Bree were finally safe, and they were starting to heal from the trauma they'd endured. We spent time together, just the three of us, doing simple things that allowed us to reconnect. I made sure to emphasize that no matter what had happened in the past, I was always going to be there for them, no matter how many obstacles we had to face. As for John, I knew it wasn't over. He would try to find a way back into our lives, but he had crossed a line I couldn't ignore. The man who once shared my blood was no longer the brother I had known. He was someone else now, someone dangerous and deceitful. I couldn't trust him, and I couldn't forgive him. But the road ahead was clear. With the support of my family, the loyalty of people like Tom, Carl, and Connie, and the love I had for my daughters, I was ready to move on and build something better, something stronger than what had come before. My life wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. It was defined by the strength to overcome it and build a future that was worthy of my family's legacy. And in that, I found my peace. The court and the deal was set into motion. Everything was moving fast, but we were prepared. The company's growth was a priority, and with Tom on board, we were poised for success. I could see how much he believed in this, and it gave me confidence. The next few days felt like a blur. My body was still healing, but my mind was sharp, focused on the future. The girls seemed to be adjusting well to the changes. Beau and Bree were more resilient than I expected, their bond with each other growing stronger. They knew their mother's actions had consequences, but I hoped they'd always carry with them the lessons they'd learned from this turmoil. By the end of the week, we had moved into a new home, and I had received the first of many calls from clients eager to work with us now that John was no longer part of the company. It was bittersweet. John's downfall had created an opening, but I wasn't about to celebrate his misery. I had worked hard to build a reputation for honesty and integrity, and I was determined to keep that reputation intact. As the weeks passed, things began to settle into a new rhythm. Connie and Carl kept me updated on the business side, while Tom worked tirelessly to integrate himself into the company. He was a natural leader, and I was glad to have him by my side. At home, things were more peaceful. The girls continued to adjust to their new lives, and I found myself focusing on rebuilding my relationship with them. It wasn't just about protection anymore. It was about teaching them the values I had learned the hard way: integrity, love, and the importance of standing up for what's right. I wanted them to know that no matter what happened, they could always rely on me. Beth made one final attempt to reach out, sending me another letter. This time I didn't throw it away immediately. I read it, hoping to find some trace of sincerity. But all I found was more regret for the situation, without any real understanding of the harm she had caused. She mentioned wanting to see the girls, but it was clear that she didn't truly comprehend the impact of her choices. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. John's legal troubles continued, and soon, news broke that he was facing serious charges. His lawyer was negotiating a plea deal, and it seemed like the justice system would hold him accountable for his actions. It wasn't a win for me. It wasn't even closure, but it was a step toward justice, a step toward making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. The business continued to thrive under the new leadership, and as we expanded, I could feel a sense of pride in what we were building. We were creating something solid, something that didn't rely on deceit or manipulation. It was built on hard work, loyalty, and integrity. One evening, as I sat in my new office, my daughters came in to visit. They were both excited to show me something. Bree had passed her driving test, and Beau was preparing to take hers. I could see the joy in their faces, a joy that came from their own growth, their own accomplishments. "We're getting older, Daddy," Bree said, her smile lighting up the room. "We're going to make you proud." And in that moment, I realized I had already done what I set out to do: teach them the right way to live, despite the wrongs that had been done to us. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for certain: my daughters, my family, and my company were my focus now. And no matter what obstacles came our way, we would face them together. As I sat in my new office that evening, the air was different. The weight of the past few months, with its betrayals and heartaches, had finally started to lift. The success of the business was undeniable, but what truly brought peace was watching my daughters grow, both in strength and in spirit. Bree had passed her driving test, and Beau was preparing for hers. There was a sense of pride that came with seeing them reach milestones in their lives that were filled with hope instead of pain. I smiled as Bree entered the room, her eyes bright with excitement. "We're getting older, Daddy," she said, her voice full of optimism. "We're going to make you proud." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. The pride I felt in that moment wasn't about business accomplishments or any material success. It was about the resilience they had shown in the face of everything that had happened. Despite the mess that Beth and John had created, they had held on to the core values I had tried to instill in them. They were growing into young women I could be proud of, no matter what the future held. "You already have," I said softly, a smile tugging at my lips. "You already have." I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words from them. It was a reminder that through all the chaos, I hadn't failed them. They were learning, evolving, and becoming the kind of people I always hoped they would be. Strong, capable, and kind. As the weeks passed, the business continued to grow, the foundation of integrity and hard work slowly proving itself. Tom's leadership was already starting to show its impact, and Carl and Connie were diligent in keeping things running smoothly. With John out of the picture, doors that were once closed began to open, and opportunities were arising that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. But even with all the positive changes, there were still moments when the past would resurface, like the letter from Beth that arrived one day. She reached out again, hoping to reconnect and see the girls. As I read her words, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of sadness and anger. She didn't get it. She didn't understand the damage she had done, not just to me, but to our daughters. Her letter was full of regret, but it lacked the kind of accountability I had hoped for. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. John's legal troubles continued to make headlines. He was facing serious charges, and soon the negotiations for a plea deal began. The process dragged on, and while I wasn't celebrating his downfall, there was a sense of relief in knowing that justice was being served. He wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. That knowledge gave me some peace, though it never fully erased the betrayal. On the business side, things were thriving. As we expanded, I could feel the pride that came with building something solid, something built on principles I could stand by. The contracts were coming in, and with each new client, I saw the results of our hard work. It wasn't just about profit. It was about creating something sustainable, something that would outlast the past and create a better future for my daughters. One evening, as I was finishing up paperwork in my office, Bree and Beau came in to share their excitement. Bree was practically bouncing with energy as she showed me her driving license. "I told you I could do it," she grinned, her confidence shining through. Beau, standing next to her, had a more subtle smile, but the pride in her eyes was clear. "I'm so proud of you both," I said, my heart swelling with emotion. "You two are amazing." They seemed to glow with the sense of accomplishment that comes with growing up. It reminded me of everything I had fought for, the future I had promised them, even when the world had tried to tear it apart. "We're going to make you proud, Daddy," Bree repeated. And in that moment, I knew I had already succeeded. I had taught them the values that mattered most: honesty, integrity, love, and the importance of standing up for what's right. They had learned that despite the chaos, they could still build something good, something meaningful. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was for sure. I would continue to face whatever challenges came our way, with my family by my side and the lessons of the past guiding us forward. We would face it all together, stronger than ever.